Hey, everybody. Excited to see everyone here. We're back with another exciting conversation with my friend Ken. Ken,
Hey
how are you doing?
Josh, man, I'm good. How are you doing today?
Very well, very well.
I'm very excited
Hey,
about this topic today. Very excited.
yeah, I was just going to ask you. You were talking with me earlier about vampire Christianity, which caused me to immediately sit up in my chair. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean by vampire Christianity?
Vampire Christianity comes from Dallas Willard, and Dallas Willard, who's a man who's influenced me a lot and really has influenced the church world a lot over the last several years. He defines vampire Christianity. It's his term to obviously get people's attention to think about it like it's almost a shock effect. Like what?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, and the way he then defines it is vampire Christianity is wanting enough of Christ's blood for the forgiveness of our sins, but not enough of his life for character transformation. I'll say that one more time. So vampire Christianity talks about getting enough of Christ's blood for the forgiveness of our sins, but not partaking enough of his life for our own character transformation. And so I think it's something really to think that's important to think about. And then actually in this conversation, for where we may be at in our own journey, how to how subtle is that in our own life and our own theology and our own experience? So that's where I'd like to go today. And I think, this video could help a lot of people think about that.
Yeah, I think from previous conversations we've had, there is almost an enablement culture inside of the church in a lot of different behaviors. But when you say, hey, enough of his blood to be forgiven, but yet not enough of his life to transform us, it's so easy to be enabled in the first part to say, hey, I've gotten something out of this. I feel absolved. I don't really need to do the other work of the sanctification process. But how would you say is the first step to acknowledging that you may be in that type of an enabling kind of mindset, or that you've been walking in that one way versus the other?
Yeah, one of the ways that I've thought about it, Josh, is I think we need to clarify our terms again. Biblical definitions. We need to go back to some terms because language takes on a meaning in every season, every culture, etc. So some things I think you have to kind of go back to the original and think about it. And the way that I think about it, that I think help people can kind of determine maybe where they're at on that, is there's a big difference between a Christian and a disciple. And I'll kind of just talk about this just a little bit. In the Bible, the word Christian is only used 3 times. So I don't mean that's necessarily negative to say I'm a Christian, but in our culture today, it means something totally different than what it even meant back then. The term disciple is used 262 times in the New Testament. So just that contrast tells you something. I mean, I think one writer said, the New Testament is for disciples, by disciples, all about disciples of Jesus Christ. So when you start to think about the terms and really kind of get back with them, it helps us to think about where we're at. So I would say, of a Christian culturally today kind of has taken on, I would say, 2 different things. This is kind of broad brush, but it's a way to think about them. And we can unpack it a little bit. But basically, a Christian today has taken on, this is my religion of choice. I'm not an atheist. I'm not a Hindu. I'm not a Buddhist. So I'm a Christian, which means for Easter and Christmas, I'll go to a Christian church. And if I'm going to have a wedding or a funeral, it's probably going to be in a Christian church. That's one aspect of what the word means now. So it's very, very culturally defined.
Well, I mean, to your point, I think there was a famous debate that Richard Dawkins had, the famous atheist, and he was saying that he considers himself a cultural Christian.
Yep. So that would be a great,
should make you open your eyes. Like, what labels am I using?
That would be a great example right there. So the second idea of a Christian is someone who has given mental assent to the Christian faith, to the belief system, to whatever degree they understand it, but they would say that's my mental assent to that religious belief system, and possibly have made the step toward forgiveness or for salvation. They've prayed a prayer, they've come down front, they would say, there was a point in time, but they started the journey, but that's about as far as they've gone now. So they can remember a time that I'm a Christian. And again, forgiveness of sin, taking some of the blood, but not the journey of transformation. So I want to contrast then with a disciple used 262 times. And a disciple is someone who has given the entirety of their life in trust to Jesus. The disciples from Jesus on, this was a commitment to follow him. They gave up everything and moved in that direction. In the first century, if you became a disciple, you may lose your life, lose your possessions, lose your family, whatever. So there was no uncertainty of what it meant to be a disciple. So to commit our entire life to follow Jesus, and by being with him, we become more like him. The student becomes like the master, and we're on mission with him. Again, back to the nucleus of the 12, they were on this journey with Jesus by his mission. So there's a huge contrast. I think we need to look at the terms biblically. And, years ago, this was probably, Josh, 25 years ago, I stopped classifying myself as a Christian. Now, I am a follower of Jesus, and I do believe in the Christian faith. But I moved away from that just because culturally it meant something that I did not identify with. And much of the Christian culture today, in lots of ways, I do not identify with, because it's drifted away from the basic understanding of what it means to be a Christian, which is to be a follower, a disciple of Jesus. So I think that's how we can think about it, is take a look in our own life. Where do we fit in on those two labels?
Yeah, it's interesting you saying that, because I was in a conversation, I think it was last weekend, with somebody, and I said something similar, like I don't associate with the label of Christian. And what I found was interesting is that when you say something like that, you're immediately put into one of two camps for people. You're either in the I'm currently deconstructing my faith camp, and I don't want to use the label of Christian. And that's the biggest fear that people have, of like, oh, here comes another, more deconstruction oriented Christian that is no longer willing to be called or associated with Jesus. Or, and this is where I immediately said, hey, the reason why I don't want to use that label is because I want to follow a crucified life with Jesus. That defines what my definition is. That defines my the definition behind the word Christian for me. And so I'm fine to use that label as long as the definition comes with the label.
Yep. That's the exact point I'm making, and that Dallas Willard was making on vampire Christianity. And I think some people who are moving away from the packaged presentation of Christianity are actually moving more into what it really means to be a Christian, because they are trying to move back to the basics of following this man, Jesus Christ, which is, to give my life to him and to follow him. If I had to give a definition and, on discipleship, and we could go down lots of different roads. I don't want to do that too much, but a disciple, in my estimation, I think if you look at the word, is someone who's learning to hear the shepherd's voice. Because again, we're following him and responding accordingly. So, Eugene Peterson, classic definition a long time ago, discipleship, long obedience in the same direction. So if somebody were to say, okay, what is a disciple? Basically, it's somebody who's learning to hear the voice of the shepherd, primarily through the word, and then responding accordingly. And I think the difference between the two terms at times, Christian and a disciple, is again, a Christian accepts the belief system and maybe receives salvation, but the long obedience, the long journey of ongoing obedience is not always there, and there's a separation. And Jesus clearly said, if you love me, you'll obey my words. So it doesn't have to be like a duty. I don't want to get into that, like, this is a whip type thing, religion. But there is a devotional aspect of union with, I love this person, he loves me. There's then a response to his ways. And I have a real difficulty, I'm just being honest, after many years of my own journey and then pastoring for a long time. I haven't done that in the last 10 years. But that we have an understanding that we can take him as Savior, but not take him as Lord, which has been a debate for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I'll take your forgiveness, do my own life, and meet you in heaven one day. And that just, to me, just like, I don't, you know, and I would say we're serving up a lot of that today, and that's a lot, don't want to overstate it, but a lot of what we're giving. I love Jesus, I go to Christian church, but I'll basically live my life the way I want to. And there's a major separation. And in the New Testament, there was no distinguishing between salvation and lordship. It was all in one. And we've kind of now parsed it and made a big gap between it and made some difficult theological debates over it. And to me, it just seems, you know, fairly obviously they are one and the same.
Yeah, I think any revelation can be built upon by humans in a way that's not healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, we love to camp out. I love the story of when Jesus says the transfiguration on the mountain. And Peter's first response is, let's build some tents. Let's camp out. Let's camp out here. And I feel like throughout church history, there are certain revelations that we've had in the church. And it's like we all focus on building tents around the revelation as opposed to walking in it. And I think that that's maybe what's caught us up when it comes to theology and preventing this walk of a sanctified life at the same time as embracing the fact that it's a gift of salvation as well. But to that point that you were saying about these downstream impact of living life that way, some people may be listening to this conversation and resonating with what you're saying and like, ooh, like they can feel the Holy Spirit kind of pointing at them. Are there certain things that we should be aware of that if we're seeing these patterns play out or these consequences playing out, it's said in a different way, that would indicate, hey, we may actually be walking more in that vampire Christianity track versus the crucified life track?
Yeah, I think the individual question to ask, and then I'll give some collective maybe thoughts about it, how it's affected us in a communal way, is do I really see my life as following Jesus in obedience to him? Or have I stopped at first base and I'm good? That's a way for us just to think about it. Matter of fact, for a disciple, I say there's 4 implications of that. One is that we're following a person. I'm not following a system. I'm not following a cause. I'm not following a doctrine. I'm not following a denomination. Those can be helpful in scaffolding ways, but ultimately I'm following the person of Jesus Christ. So that's what a disciple does. They're following a person. 2, there's movement. Jesus said, come follow me. A status quo Christian or a status quo disciple is an oxymoron. So we have to ask ourselves that question. Is there the ongoing movement in my life, you know, in the spiritual journey? 3rd, a disciple is a learner. That's what the word means. I like to use the word better. I mean, a student, they're a learner, a student. They're an apprentice. I'm actually learning from Jesus and applying it. That's different than sitting in a class, listening and writing notes. And that's an apprenticeship. And then the 4th thing I would say, it implies it's a journey. I'm never going to get there. You know, I'm not talking about spiritual perfectionism, but there's this ongoing journey with Jesus. And the more we go with him, the more we fall in love with him, the more we know him, the more beautiful he is to us, etc. So I would just say that's one thing individually to ask that question. Did I stop at first base, basically? Can I do it in my own life now? Or am I really on an ongoing journey as an apprentice of Jesus? We can individual can only answer that. Collectively, I would say, and there's many different reasons, so I don't want to, again, give a simple answer, but I would say one of the reasons that I believe the church is so anemic and immature is because we have a lot of converts, but very few disciples. And that's even shown by some of the studies in Barna, et cetera, over the years. And I think that's very, very true. You know, we have a lot of converts, but we don't have a lot of disciples. And the result of that is then, answering your question, some of the downstream consequences, I don't think a lot of times, therefore, we have a proper representation of what it means to be a Christian, of what Christianity should be. We present a false representation We're seeing that today everywhere. I mean, what we see on social media and in politics and in issues and stands we're taking on, and the anger and the it's just unbelievable that has a label of that's Christianity. So I don't think we're representing it to the world properly at all. But where does it go back to? To me, it goes back to the first domino. Are we a vampire Christian, or are we a disciple of Jesus? And then I would say the last one, it's weakening our witness, and it's also, I think, weakening our mission that God's called us on. So I think those are some of the downstreams that's really important.
Yeah, I think movement and learning are critical because there should be progress. There should be like something you can say, oh, I've measured growth. I've faced this same challenge again, and I feel like my natural inclination is different. Or, hey, I'm in this scenario and I get to play it again and I'm responding out of a different place. It's like that these are a lot of life is cycles. It is a rhythm. It is a repeat. We keep getting to play the infinite game. And I often think about, there's this song that the band Delirious had 25 years ago.
Yep.
And it says, "Heaven is my home." And when I remember hearing that as a kid and thinking, oh, my salvation's not an insurance policy. I can live from heaven starting today. And so this is an infinite game. This is something that is quite literally never going to end for me. So I am really, when I say I'm walking with Jesus, excuse me, and I'm choosing the crucified life, I'm choosing to bring heaven into my today in a very literal way, not figuratively, and living from the kingdom. Why would I possibly be given the gift of that and say, no, just kind of keep it as an insurance policy and engage with it later?
You just went down a track of, I think, some of the things of the redirect to move us back into this. And what you just talked about is one of those. And you and I've talked about it on a past interview. We can drop the link in the notes below. But really, it's rethinking the gospel, which is what you just talked about.
Yeah.
Instead of it just salvation, I'm forgiven, but life in the kingdom now. Again, I use Dallas a lot because he's influenced me. But Dallas, he would kind of facetiously say, our process of journeying with Jesus in the life in the kingdom now, and the process of sanctification, whatever word you want to use, transformation, should be an ongoing journey, so that when we trip into heaven, we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's the natural next step.
Yeah.
Of my transformation in the life of the kingdom. I'm now here. But I don't wait and then, oh, I'm dead. Now I'm here. No, there's an ongoing living of it now and on the way. So I think you're right on. The other thing we've talked about before, which I think is a redirect, is redefining the church. So again, you and I have done a whole interview on that. We'll put the link in. But I think we have to rethink the gospel, redefine the church if we're going to move away from vampire Christianity.
It's really good.
And then the third thing is we've been talking about a lot, something that I've been doing, I think we have to help people know, how do I actually become more like Christ? How do I?
Yeah, if you recognize that there's a disconnect, now what?
Now what? Yeah. And so, of course, that's something I've been working on and you and I've been talking about a lot. But I think those things would be helpful to at least move away from what I think is often presented. And I think we have a lot of vampire Christianity today.
Yeah. Well, you've been offering, people very clear next steps in what you've been doing. If you can just share, if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, that's absolutely me. I know that something's resonating. I want to take some practical next steps on resetting things.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah, I've been doing a course I've just started called Form. And Form is a guided journey in becoming more like Christ. Form, spiritual formation, a guided journey in becoming more like Christ. And again, the little byline has been helping. How do we actually, in practical, something we can really grab onto, connected, integrated ways, and in incremental ways actually become more and more like Christ. It's not a formula. It's not paint by numbers. I don't believe in that at all. But it's at least learning to access and live out of the life of God, the kingdom, the life of God that's already in us, so we can move in that direction. So when we die and get to heaven, we won't be too surprised.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
that's what Form is all about.
Well, how can people find out more about the course and how to sign up for it?
Yeah, two different things. They can go on our website, kenlroberts.com, and they'll find Form there. Or if they want to go directly to Form, they can simply go form.kenlroberts.com. So either way, we'll get them directly there. And then also, we've been doing these on my YouTube channel now. A lot of people are starting to listen because I think this is a very interesting conversation. And we want it to continue to be that. So if people would like to continue on, they could simply, hit the subscribe button. They'll get pinged, when we're doing these things, and we can have the ongoing conversation around this. But I want to move away from vampire Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was very well said. And I love Dallas's breakdown of what the difference between the two is and just what we were discussing about the jumping off point. There's no reason, once you acknowledge that that's kind of the pattern that you've been in, to stay in it. It's not just like a logical, oh, it's better over here. It's infinitely better.
Absolutely. That's where the true life is.
That's right.
By entering into it. It really is.
That's right.
Hey, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for doing these with me. I appreciate it a lot.
I love it.
Thanks, man. Okay.